The slap landed before I even saw her hand move. My glasses shot from my face and skidded across the ballroom's polished floor, splintering under the chandelier's light while 130 guests froze into silence. My cheek throbbed, but the sting in my chest hurt far worse. On her wedding day, my daughter-in-law Juliet had struck me because I would not give her the keys to my apartment. "That's what happens when you're selfish," she shouted, voice slicing through the hush. "A woman your age doesn't need all that space." No one rushed to my side, not one person. I knelt shaking to gather the broken lenses, feeling the world watch and do nothing. Some guests dropped their eyes, others murmured to one another, but not a soul stepped forward for the old mother-in-law who'd just been publicly shamed. My son Ethan stared at the floor as if I were a shadow that might disappear if he didn't look up. "You're not welcome here anymore," Juliet added, smoothing her flawless gown as though swatting away a speck of dust. "Ethan and I want privacy to start our life. Your apartment will do until we buy something better." Her words dripped poison. For months I'd absorbed her little jabs, my tired clothes, my aging car, my small life. But this crossed into a place from which there is no easy return. I stood, feeling every stare like a needle on my skin. Tears slid down my face, but inside, something steadied. That slap wasn't just a hand against a cheek, it was a line drawn in fire. For years I'd chosen quiet, humility, and a life without show. I kept truths hidden, secrets not even my own son knew. As I turned toward the exit, memories crowded in. I saw again Juliet's first visit 2 years earlier, her face falling when she stepped into my modest home. "So this is where Ethan's mother lives," she'd said, loud enough for the air to carry it. After that, every visit became a test I hadn't agreed to take. "Aurora, you should really downsize," she'd suggested at dinner 3 months ago, lips stretched in a smile that never reached her eyes. "At your age, you can't maintain a big place. And we might start a family soon. We'll need more room." Ethan's personality seemed to shrink whenever she spoke. My strong-minded son turned marionette, nodding along. It escalated by degrees. First my wardrobe, "Don't you have anything more modern?" Then my car, "That old thing is unsafe." Then my job, "Why is a woman your age still working? Shouldn't you be relaxing?" Each sentence was a pinprick meant to deflate my self-worth. My name is Aurora Hughes, 68, widow, lover of quiet things. I work 3 days a week at a small flower shop. I drive a 10-year-old sedan. I shop sales. To people like Juliet, I'm a woman getting by on a fixed income. That is the image I have cultivated on purpose. What those pitying eyes in the ballroom could not see was the life I had before my husband died. Robert was not the harmless office worker the world assumed. We chose modesty, we chose privacy, we chose to mask our means for safety and sanity. That decision, I now realize, was a kind of prophecy. As the air conditioning pricked my damp skin, I stepped into the corridor with my old purse tucked close. I dialed a number I hadn't used in over a year. "Carlos, it's Aurora. Come to the Royal Oaks ballroom. Now, bring the documents." "Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes?" he asked, steady but concerned. "Once we do this, there's no way to roll it back." I glanced back through the doorway. Juliet laughed with her friends, no doubt retelling how she'd put me in my place. Ethan stood beside her, smiling weakly, the guilt smoothed out of his face. "I'm sure," I said. 30 minutes. I hung up, squared my shoulders, and walked to the parking lot. For years I had worn a mask to protect my family. Tonight they would meet the woman behind it. And when they did, they would learn what regret really means. I sat in my old sedan beneath the streetlights, the lot quiet except for the distant hum of music. 30 minutes until their lives changed. 30 minutes until they realized the magnitude of what they'd done, mocking the one person who had shielded them in more ways than they could imagine. Page 2, waiting in the car, memory unspooled. 2.5 years ago, Ethan had arrived with that boyish grin I knew from scraped knees and school trophies. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special." Juliet floated in on designer heels and a smile that never touched her eyes. The scan she gave my apartment, every corner assessed with crisp, clinical judgment, told me more than her words ever would. "How cozy," she murmured, eyes landing on second-hand furniture and sun-faded curtains. Her tone said the opposite. At dinner, she pecked at the meal I'd prepared with care. When I asked about her family, answers came wrapped in gauze. But she asked about my finances plainly, like a student checking boxes on a form. How do you manage on a widow's pension? Must be hard. She had no idea I was studying her as closely as she studied me. Patterns emerged. With each visit, she offered concern. That sounded like condemnation. You deserve better than this in your golden years, she'd say while her gaze weighed location, the balcony view, the size of the rooms, every feature of an asset she did not own. Once, while Ethan was in the bathroom, I caught her whispering on my kitchen phone. Yes, Mom, his mother's apartment is in a prime area. If I can convince her to downsize, we can stay here while we look for our place. She's so nauve she might even thank us. Her words cut, but I smiled when she returned, as if I hadn't heard a thing. From then on, we played our parts. She the concerned daughter, in law I the gentle older woman who needed guidance. Behind the politeness, I took notes, watched patterns, mapped her ambition. The pressure sharpened once they got engaged. Juliet spread brochures for active senior communities across my coffee table like she was pitching a client. No maintenance, meals included 24-hour care, she sang. Then the fear tactics. What if you fall and no one finds you for days? Ethan echoed her lines as if reading from the same script. I called an old friend in real estate. Amelia, I need a discreet look into a couple's financial situation, I said, giving her the names. What she found turned my stomach. They were drowning. The wedding budget topped 50,000 on credit. Their rent was months behind. The cars were financed to the hilt, credit cards near max. Their lives, curated for Instagram, were held together with tape and borrowed time. Suddenly everything made sense. The rush, the relentless nudging, the fixation on my empty rooms. This wasn't love driving them forward. It was desperation hitching a ride on my address. Worse still, Amelia's report showed Ethan had been calling banks to ask about loans against a parent's property and how to obtain power of attorney for an elderly relative. The boy I raised had allowed himself to be taught that his mother was not a person but a solution. 3 days before the wedding, Juliet dropped the mask. Aurora, stop being selfish, she said, eyes hard. We've sacrificed for this marriage. The least you can do is help with housing. That night I phoned Carlos, my advisor since Robert died. Prepare the papers, I told him. All of them. I may need to show my hand. He cautioned me, as he always did. Once the truth is out, Mrs. Hughes, you can't put it back. Families don't always survive. I know, I said. But I won't survive this either, not like this. Back in the present, the parking lot, the cool night air. I called my neighbor Joseph. Could you bring me the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk? I asked. 70 years old, big heart, steady hands, he'd been my anchor since Robert passed. A week earlier, he'd warned me. I saw Juliet outside with a man carrying a measuring wheel. When they spotted me, they left. Be careful, Aurora. 10 minutes later, he shuffled across the lot with the folder. You look shaken, he said, passing it to me. It's time, I told him simply. I opened the folder in the dim car light. Bank certificates, property deeds, investment statements, proof that the poor widow with the old car had spent decades quietly tending a garden no one else could see. Robert had built an import business into a silent empire. Together we decided our wealth would never be a costume. Visible money invites trouble, he'd say. Invisible money gives you choices, and tucked among the ledgers, my private shame. For 3 years, I had been quietly patching Ethan's holes. 4,500 in monthly transfers labeled as bonuses, rent, discounts. That were my deposits, payments that kept his cards from default. I had mistaken rescue for love, enablement for care. While Juliet called me a burden, I had financed their ability to stand upright. The apartment Juliet coveted, the least valuable asset I owned. I kept it for the memories the last years with Robert, the plans we made, the night he died in my arms. Headlights curved into the lot. Carlos, right on time. Page 3 stepped from his car with a leather brief under his arm, all precision and calm. Mrs. Hughes, he said softly. Once we walk back in, the course is set. Do you still wish to proceed? I looked through the glass doors at the spill of warm light, at the silhouettes moving under chandeliers. Somewhere inside, my son laughed on command. I've never been more certain, I answered. They need to meet the real me. We stood beneath the street lamp and reviewed each page. Here is the immediate suspension of monthly transfers made in Ethan's name, Carlos said. Here, the notice withdrawing your confidential guarantee on his lease, landlord to be informed at dawn. And here, the cancellation of your guarantee for tonight's celebration. I signed with a hand that trembled, not from doubt, but from the weight of years. This isn't revenge, I told him, more for myself than for him. It's gravity. Actions fall back to earth. Understood, he said, filing the documents with neat clicks. And for what it's worth, I've seen greed undo strong families. Courage is rarer than money. We walked inside. The music stuttered to a stop. Conversations thinned to a thread. People turned, some annoyed, many curious, a few recognizing Carlos and stiffening with the reflex that comes when money and law enter a room together. Juliet reacted first. Why are you here again, Aurora? She called from the dance floor, smile tight, eyes alert. Haven't you made enough of a scene? Carlos spoke in a clear, professional voice. Apologies for the interruption. I have urgent legal notices for Mr. Ethan Hughes and Mrs. Juliet Dawson. Ethan approached, color draining from his face. I met his eyes. This is Carlos Jones, my financial and legal advisor. Carlos opened the brief and began. Mr. Hughes, the rental guarantee your mother provided has been revoked. Notice goes to your landlord in the morning. You'll have 30 days to secure a new guarantor or vacate. Also, the monthly transfers totaling $500 covering credit cards, insurance, and assorted expenses are suspended effective immediately. Lastly, Hughes has withdrawn her guarantee for this event's remaining balance. Management is within its rights to request payment before guests depart. A soft, horrified sound moved through the room. Juliet's composure cracked. That's impossible, she hissed. Look at her. She works in a flower shop and drives a relic. She doesn't have that kind of money. Appearances are a poor accountant, I said. Robert and I chose a quiet life because loud wealth draws predators. Ethan's voice came small, a child's voice trapped in a grown man. You've been paying for everything? For 3 years, I replied calmly. Waiting for you to remember who you were raised to be. Phones lifted, whispers multiplied. Somewhere in the back, a guest began quietly recording, capturing the moment the story turned. Please, Ethan said, reaching out with empty hands. There must be a way. The way, I said, was before the slap. Juliet staggered, then sped toward anger. You can't do this. We're family. Carlos slid one final document free. Mrs. Hughes has amended her will. Assets previously designated for Mr. Hughes will be directed to charities protecting seniors from family abuse. The sound that moved through the ballroom then was not a gasp so much as a verdict. Juliet's knees gave and she sank into a chair, tears streaking powder. Everything is ruined, she choked. No, I said, stepping close enough that she had to look at me. What's ruined is the lie that you can exploit people without consequence. You mistook kindness for weakness. That error is yours to correct. Ethan hovered, torn between his wife's panic and the reality settling over his shoulders. Mom, please. You can grow from this, I said, softer than I felt. But you will do it without my money, without my home, and without the promise of my estate. From the periphery, the ballroom manager approached, papers in hand, voice tight with duty. Carlos handled the legal exchange. Payment now or services stop. I turned to go. Someone called my name. Lucy, my niece, rushing forward with wet eyes. Aunt Aurora, I didn't know. If I had, I know love, I said, touching her cheek. Not everyone loses themselves. Her question came quiet, trembling. Why did you hide the money? Because money deforms people who haven't decided who they are. I answered. I wanted love to be love, not a ledger. Carlos inclined his head. All documents served. I faced my son one last time. When you're ready to talk about respect and responsibility, and to apologize without asking for anything, I will listen. Until then, the mess you made tonight is yours to clean. I left the ballroom the way I had entered it, upright, Only this time I carried my dignity beside me like a lantern. 3 days passed after that fateful wedding night. My apartment had become a quiet fortress of peace, a place where silence no longer meant loneliness but healing. Joseph stopped by every morning with coffee and warm pastries from the bakery around the corner. "The day you stood up in that ballroom," he told me, "was the day you reclaimed your dignity." He was right. For the first time in years, I could breathe without guilt. But the outside world wasn't silent. My phone rang almost nonstop. Ethan called dozens of times, his messages shifting from outrage to desperation. Juliet sent 14 texts filled with chaos. "You've ruined us. You have no heart. Please, fix this." Her parents had even shown up at my door twice, demanding that I correct my mistake. I didn't open the door either time. I had spent too many years cleaning up other people's messes. That morning, Carlos arrived carrying a folder thicker than before. His expression was grave but calm, the kind of calm that only comes from experience. "Mrs. Hughes," he began, "everything has unfolded just as expected. Ethan and Juliet were evicted yesterday. The ballroom management filed suit to recover the unpaid balance. Their credit lines have been frozen, and both cars have been repossessed. Their debts are now public record." "And where are they staying?" I asked quietly, though my heart already knew. "With Juliet's parents," he replied. "In their small apartment, 4 adults and growing tension. The situation, according to my sources, is volatile." I nodded. "I suppose reality has finally arrived for them." That afternoon, as I watered my balcony plants, a car pulled up outside. It was Lucy, my niece, and to my surprise Amelia sat beside her. From the back seat, Joseph climbed out carrying yet another folder. "Aurora," Lucy called up. "We need to talk. It's important." Moments later, they filled my living room, their faces drawn tight with worry. "Aunt Aurora," Lucy began, clutching the folder. "I've been investigating since that night. There are things you need to know before they go any further." "What things?" I asked, bracing myself. Amelia took a deep breath. "Ethan and Juliet have been planning something far more sinister than we imagined. I found evidence that Juliet consulted lawyers who specialize in declaring elderly relatives mentally incompetent. Their plan was detailed. They intended to gain legal control over all your assets." Joseph leaned forward, his voice low but trembling with anger. "There's more. The night you left the ballroom, Juliet was on the phone saying, 'The old woman ruined everything. But we still have Plan B.'" A cold knot twisted in my stomach. "Plan B." Lucy took my hand. "They're spreading rumors, Aunt Aurora. Telling people you've lost your grip on reality. They're using the wedding as proof that you're unstable, that you acted irrationally in front of witnesses. They've already filed a preliminary petition to have your competency evaluated." For a moment the room swayed. Not from fear, but from disbelief at how far they would go. Carlos arrived just then, stepping into a room heavy with tension. He carried yet another folder, official documents stamped with legal seals. "I'm afraid what they've told you is true," he said gravely. "Yesterday, Ethan filed a petition asking the court to examine your mental fitness. He claims your emotional outburst at the wedding and your sudden financial decisions are signs of cognitive decline. Several guests provided sworn statements describing you as irrational." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "They tricked people into signing those papers. Most don't even understand what happened that night." I sat still for a long moment, then straightened. "If they want war," I said quietly, "they'll get one. But on my terms." I went to my desk, opened a drawer, and retrieved my own brown folder, the one I had been building for 3 days. This contains medical records, financial proof, and photographic evidence of the slap Juliet gave me. It contains witness statements from neighbors and employees who saw her behavior toward me. I've also been in contact with 3 lawyers who specialize in elder abuse. If they want to drag this into court, I'll meet them there, with truth as my witness." Joseph smiled grimly. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." But then, something unexpected happened. Joseph pulled out his phone. "Actually," he said, "you already have an army behind you." He turned the screen toward me. There it was, a viral video, the footage of the wedding confrontation, filmed by guests, had spread across social media like wildfire, millions of views, thousands of comments. People weren't seeing a senile old woman. They were seeing a mother reclaiming her power. "Look," Amelia said, scrolling through the comments. "They're calling you an inspiration. Justice for Aurora is trending. People are sharing their own stories of financial abuse. You've started something huge." Carlos nodded, relief softening his features. "This public perception will destroy any legal claim that you're incompetent. It's impossible to paint you as unstable when the nation sees you as brave and articulate." For the first time in days, I felt something other than anger or grief. I felt purpose. "Then let them proceed," I said, a small smile forming. "The court will not only hear my defense, it will hear my story." I looked at the people who had stood by me when my own family had not. "We're not just going to defend my name. We're going to use this to help others. I'll speak publicly about what happened. If I have to turn my humiliation into a lesson, then that's what I'll do." Amelia's eyes lit up. "You'd change lives, Aurora. People need to see that standing up for yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival." 6 months later, I sat under the bright lights of a television studio, poised, composed, and no longer afraid. The program was Stories of a Lifetime, hosted by journalist Catherine Diaz, known for her compassion and integrity. The camera crews moved with quiet focus, and Carlos sat beside me as my legal voice of reason. In the audience were Joseph, Amelia, and Lucy, my truest family. When the red light blinked on, Catherine began, "Good evening. Tonight we share a story that has touched millions. The story of Aurora Hughes, a woman who stood up against the people who should have loved her most." Her introduction washed over me like a wave of closure. "Mrs. Hughes," she asked, "how does it feel knowing your courage has inspired so many?" I took a breath, steady but full of emotion. "It feels freeing. What happened to me was painful, but if my story can help others recognize their own abuse, then it was worth it. I want every older person to know, age doesn't erase your right to dignity." For 45 minutes, we revisited the entire journey. The manipulation, the slap, the revelation, and the lawsuit that collapsed under its own lies. The court had ruled in my favor, declaring Ethan's claims baseless and ordering him and Juliet to pay my legal fees. Their reputations were shattered. Their debts multiplied. Catherine's final question was the hardest. "Do you have a message for your son?" I looked straight into the camera. "Then, I love you. That hasn't changed. But love isn't servitude. Love doesn't mean letting people destroy your peace. The door to my heart is open, but only for the man I raised, not the one greed turned you into." The studio fell silent. When the cameras stopped, the crew applauded. Tears filled Catherine's eyes. "Mrs. Hughes," she said softly, "you didn't just survive, you set others free." That night, as I drove home with Joseph and Lucy, the city lights blurred into a soft gold glow. I felt lighter than I had in years. My pain had found purpose. My silence had found a voice. And for the first time in my life, I was not just surviving, I was living.